as you mentioned, first world champion, first even finalist from Northern Ireland. But let's talk about the beaten finalist, who was also the first from his country to make a world championship final, the first to make any televised final in steel tip darts, Thibault Tricole. What could this past week do for French darts?
Borrow a line from Chris Murphy in the commentary. I think he said that Thibault was the trailblazer of French darts, and he certainly is that, isn't he? He made his World Championship debut, the first player from France to play in a World Championship. That was back at the O2 2 years ago. He got to the TV stages of the World Masters the year before. And even recently, we've seen him become one of the first players from France to play on the Pro Tour over in the PDC. So he's someone that has been making a lot of history for his country. And you've got to say, France isn't a big country for darts. It's not one of the most popular sports. I remember we spoke to the head honcho of PDC Europe a couple of years ago now. That this might have changed by now anyway, but Werner von Moltke said that PDC Europe, all the events they've put on, all the Euro Tour events, they've never sold a single ticket to someone in France for one of their events. That might have changed by now. A couple of years later, it's certainly going to change now, you'd think. But you think back to then, and France, not a big country for darts. It's had the French Open dating back to 1978. I was doing a little bit of research before we started looking at the events that they do put on in France. They've not had the French Open on since 2019. That's mainly, you'd say, probably due to the pandemic, because that event is usually held in the summertime, and we've not seen a lot of events at that level played in the last couple of summers. But it's not on the calendar for this year either. But going forward, you'd like to see some progression, wouldn't you? You'd like to see that French Open come back for 2023. And this is only going to do good things for darts in France. You'd like to think anyway. Okay, if he'd have won the title, that'd have been even better. But to go all the way to the final, make that history, and what a run he had as well. Some really tight games that he's come through, Thibault Tricole, to get to the final. And he said it himself in his interviews. He was happy with the wins, but maybe he wasn't so happy with the performances. And he said that he wasn't happy with how he's played. But to get to a final, I think you've got to take a lot of positives from that. And in some ways, it's difficult to gauge how much this is going to do for French darts, because you look at other players that have won big titles or gone on big runs. Look at players like Jose de Sousa from Portugal. He won the Grand Slam. We've not really seen much happen in terms of darts in Portugal since then. So just because we see a player go on a deep run or win one of these major titles doesn't necessarily translate to a big boom for darts. But we'll see, and hopefully we'll get Thibault on, or we'll get someone on from the French Darts Federation over there to see what their plans are for darts, because I know soft tip was a bit bigger than steel tip back in the day, but to get to a final deserves a lot of credit as well for what he's done. And he's someone that, again, is making some strides. He wants to play PDC darts, he wants to play WDF darts, he wants to play as much darts as he can, and he's someone that is still improving. I don't think we've seen the best of him yet on the stage. So yeah, I think there's plenty more to come from Thibault, at least. French darts, I think there's still a few question marks about that.
Yeah, I think it's way too early to say if this will do anything for French darts. But what I think it will be most likely to do is to give some inspiration and belief to the players that he's played against domestically for years now, that they too can go and try to challenge themselves and play at the highest level, or higher levels at least, and progress in the game. And, you look back to, we'll take Dutch darts 30 years ago before Raymond van Barneveld. When he first broke onto the scene, darts was not what it is today in the Netherlands, but it obviously gave players that belief and started to get some press coverage for it. And if you look 30 years later, well, the Dutch, after the four home nations in Ireland, are the leading stars of the game. They have the most tour card holders of any country other than England. They have the most major titles of any country other than England and Scotland. Actually, they might even be ahead of Scotland, because I'm forgetting that Michael van Guren just in and of himself, but throwing him out more than any country other than England and Scotland. And that's because of the depth and quality that did start before Barney, but obviously that Barney was the catapult for. But if you look, and this is not the first time I've done this. This is the first time I've done it for Thibault Tricole. But I remember when Mensur Suljovic broke through, I started to run some searches on Google News to try to see, was he getting any press in the Austrian news? And originally he wasn't, although when he made his first major final, he did get into Die Presse which is the newspaper of record in Austria. Thibault Tricole isn't in Le Monde, but he did get mentioned in 3 different French newspapers yesterday, at least on the online versions. And that's not something you would normally see. If just running searches for him in the past, he would be lucky to get more than 1 or 2 a year in any French language newspaper. So it is showing that success breeds press coverage, and press coverage breeds new fans who might not have even known that darts was played professionally before. So I think this is obviously going to do well for darts in France. But I think the biggest thing is what I started with, that it's going to hopefully have some of those players that at times have beaten him, but at the very least have played against him a lot, to think, you know what, I too can go play in events because I know I'm good enough. I know I can hang with Tricole when I play him, and that will lead to more players playing, and that will lead in the long term to more coverage, and therefore the growth of French darts. I think that's where it starts, because the media coverage isn't like what it was for Mensur Suljovic when he broke through, just based on what I've seen today. And because of that, there still needs to be a little bit more growth first, but you can't do much better than making a world final to start that.